Hey everyone, welcome to Be Our Guest, our weekly virtual happy hour with industry professionals. I'm Dev Janke, Artistic Director of Live and in Color. We are an artist-serving organization dedicated to developing new stage works that promote and celebrate diversity. This month is Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month, and we are spending this time celebrating the AAPI community, which is so exciting. One of the historic events May marks is the anniversary of the construction of the first transcontinental railroad, something that would not have been possible without the labor of Chinese immigrants. In honor of AAPI month, all donations made during this program will be matched dollar for dollar. So please make a tax-deductible donation today to support our artists by going to liveandincolor.org right now. Double your impact today. So now it's time to grab a cocktail and start leaving questions for our amazing guests in the comments. Please welcome three incredible artists who are writing the narratives we need to see on our stages. Please give a warm welcome to Richard Rodgers Award-winning composer, lyricist, librettist, Timothy Huang, and Weston Go Like New Musical Award recipients, Isabella Dawis and Tidtaya Sinutoke. Hello, everyone. Hi, friends.
Hi.
Hey.
I'm so happy to see you all. Thank you for joining me. Where are you all tuning in from? Tim?
I'm calling from Manhattan. I'm actually in Hamilton Heights.
Yes. And Isabella?
Tim and I were just saying before we got on stage that we would have been neighbors. I'm in Minneapolis right now, which is my hometown. But before the pandemic, I was living in New York, and okay. Tim and I apparently were very close to each other.
Yeah. Tidtaya?
I'm in Queens, New York right now.
All right. Well, it's so good to see you all. I always like to start at the beginning. Anyone can jump in, but how did you begin writing musicals? What was your inspiration from as a young person or maybe later in life that got you into this crazy land of musical theater? Tim, you want to go first?
Do I look like I want to go first?
Come on.
Is that what it is? No, I'm just sort of grinning because I tell this story a lot, and sometimes I tire of the sound of my voice when I tell it. Yeah. But I studied acting in the mid to late 90s, and I went to NYU and I finished. And for the first 3 years or so out of graduation, I was basically doing a lot of the same sort of narrow vision stock kind of roles, and a lot of it in workshop situations for new musicals, because in the late 90s, when you looked like me, unless you were an exceptional performer, and I was not, you couldn't get a job playing dancing potato from the left, third from the left or whatever, looking the way I did. There were exactly 3 shows that you could do regionally or on Broadway that were technically right for you, and if you weren't actually right for them, you were SOL. So I started to do a lot of little things and a lot of little workshops of new things, and just found that a lot of the time when they were looking for Asian performers, the writers weren't always Asian or weren't always really there to serve, telling our stories in a way that I think served the integrity of our cultures. We were very frequently a means to an end, right? And so I kind of was like, oh, well, that's not what I signed up for. So I went back to NYU and I got my degree in musical theater writing.
The rest is history.
All right.
I know, Isabella, you are also an actor. Was your path similar or was it a different journey?
My path is due to Tidtaya, really.
Oh, okay.
Because I met Tidtaya as a performer of musical theater like Tim. I was an actor previously. And I really came to New York. I think I was rather starry-eyed and idealistic because I came to the Big Apple just wanting to be in the room with writers and directors and creative people. So I wasn't. I didn't even go with the dream of being on Broadway, which is, I think, kind of strange for a young actor. But I mean, like I mentioned, I'm from Minneapolis. I was really lucky because I not only grew up in this hugely, diverse theater community, which is so rich and wonderful for a child to grow up in. But I was also exposed to the craft of writing for the stage. And, I was able to be in workshops where people were creating new musicals, very early on in my career. I always loved it so much, and it felt soul fulfilling and creatively rewarding for me. And that's that's what we want. I think that's what all of us want who work as artists. So that's a perspective that's where I'm coming from when I met Tidtaya. And it was Tidtaya who kind of took my hand and led me on this journey into writing for musical theater. And before then, I had been interested, I think at some point, in college, especially when you're an actor, you write, you write, you're like, okay, let's see if I can do something, that I can be in, just kind of like what Tim was talking about. So I had tried it before. I tried writing for the stage, but it wasn't until I met Tidtaya that kind of the light bulb went off in my head that, I could be a book writer and a lyricist. And for some reason that idea had never clicked in my head, but it makes total sense to me now because it's kind of the culmination of my artistic experience and my joys and passions and skills and what I love to do. But yeah, I'll let Tidtaya speak about.
Well, yeah, Tidtaya. So how did you lure her into this crazy world? What's your background getting here?
I've never been an actor. At the start. Well, I mean, I grew up in Thailand and moved here when I was 17. So I don't think musical theater existed back there. I mean, right now it's growing industry in Thailand, but back then, long time ago, it wasn't. So I got to experience musical theater when I was in high school in Michigan here. And it's like, okay, I always compare things in life to food because it's easier and I love to eat. So it's like
always best to compare things to food. I love it.
So it's like when you eat rice every day and then all of a sudden you get to eat pizza for the first time and you just fell in love with it. So that's, I guess, my definition of like how I get into theater was to see shows when I was 17, my first year here in America. So but yeah, and then I went to school. I did go to NYU musical theater writing, same as Tim, and then worked in several projects. And Isabella is an amazing actor, singer, pianist, and of course, book writer and lyricist. And, it's always, I'm always very grateful to get to work with her. So.
And what is your musical background before you got to New York? Were you a pianist before that? What were you?
Yeah, well, I went to performing arts high school in Thailand before I moved here. And I played piano since I was 5. But when I was in Thailand, I was actually a flutist. But I was I was a student in Thailand, which is kind of strange. Well, not back then I thought it was strange, but now thinking about it, I actually think it's very grateful is that when I entered this high school as like a flutist, I also was forced to learn Thai instrument. I did learn Thai instruments since I was a kid, but this is like properly learn it through like patterns of like songs that you need to learn first, and then there's a ceremony and there's a variety of things. So it's like you get to experience world music through my school life. We did choir as well as Thai singing, which is very much like the teacher just starts singing and then you just like, okay, so there is no music, right? So we got to learn by ear. It's great. So it's, in a way, I guess that's the blessing for my life is that I've learned both ways, like Western and also Thai traditional in a way. So I guess that's my background. And I went to Berkeley, so that's very popish. And then of course going to NYU, which is very musical. So that's all my definition of music.
I love that all three of you have such eclectic backgrounds, which I think informs your work so beautifully. I want to start talking about your amazing work. Tim, you've written multiple musicals that focus on Asian American protagonists, and you sort of explained why, including American Morning, Koi Story, and Peter and the Wave. Mm-hmm. You know, you were one of the first to do it, and what kind of reactions have you received over the years sharing that work?
Oh, so many. No, I mean, I think initially I got a lot of resistance, not even because there's this sort of like knowing, you know, racism or whatever, pervasive racism, but because we didn't really have a language for what I was trying to do. As I recall, my very first musical, which I never put on a resume, I don't talk about because I wrote it before I went to grad school, and it's kind of a mess. The intention had been from the get-go to cast only Asian faces, Asian American faces, even though there was nothing tying them to their cultures in the text. A lot of people didn't really understand what that was because we didn't understand yet that the only characters we saw on stage that looked like us were there to represent, because we were a monolith, like we represented something. There was a dramatic reason for it. We had to justify our existence on stage based on our culture. We understand that to be a little bit different now, and furthermore, that like, you know, a piece need not necessarily be about culture to warrant looking at a performer of color, which is fantastic. But you know, in those early days, it was very much like, why are you limiting yourself? You know, I wrote a one-person show in the early 2000s called The View from Here, and the intent initially had been to cast Mike Lee, who at the time I think was in Jesus Christ Superstar. We were doing it at Nymph, and I had been talking to him about it, and I'd written, you know, some of the music for him. And when we got around to casting, like, it was just sort of a non-issue. It was a non-starter, and there was no amount of like pushback I could give, because it was literally, it's a one-person show. You have to like cast a wide net. You have to, you know, find so-and-so who fits a better demographic, which is fine, because the performer who wound up doing it is still one of my best friends, and you know, but it was very like, I felt like I was having a conversation with nobody. Like I would try to explain why things needed to be a certain way, and they look at me like, they don't though, they don't, and I'd be like, no, you don't understand, they do, and there's a reason for it. I can't articulate it right now. Come talk to me in 20 years and I'll be able to have a language for it now. But I think the most, like, my favorite story is so American Morning is about two Chinese immigrant cab drivers who are sharing opposite shifts off the same medallion. And this is based on an article I read in the New York Times. The real life people were Nepali, but for reasons I won't go into now, I changed them. I had a producer who was like, "Oh, show me your script. I really like these songs." And I, you know, sent them the script, and they kind of took me out to lunch at the, you know, Algonquin room, and they were like, "Let's talk about your show. We really think one of your cab drivers should be white." And I didn't know. I didn't know how do you respond to that? Like, are we reading the same script? Like, do you just not understand what I'm like? You know, you can't be a jerk in those situations. But I mean, it was very funny. It was eye opening, I should say, probably. Yeah.
You know, as I said, your work has pushed the whole musical theater industry forward, and I think we all have you to thank for that, just in terms of being one of the first.
Very kind. It's generous.
Tidtaya and Isabella, you won the 2020 Weston Ghostlight New Musical Award for your amazing musical Half the Sky. And you also just finished a virtual writing retreat with Goodspeed Musicals to develop your new musical, Sunwatcher. What's it like to collaborate virtually? I mean, that's sort of for all of us, it's been a new experience. What's it been like for the two of you this past year and a half? Or maybe you were doing it before already.
It's new to us, as new as it is, I think, to everybody else. And Tidtaya and I have kind of been doing two activities in the past year or so, and one of them has been, as you mentioned, Sun Watcher, our musical about a Japanese astronomer Hisako Koyama, who is also a woman and a survivor of World War II, of the firebombing of Tokyo by the U.S. She's an incredible story. We started this show basically from scratch during the pandemic. So that's been a whole ride, writing a musical from a blank page, to completely, over Zoom, over Google Drive, and we've been lucky because we've had the support of the Civilians R&D group, a Good Speed, as you mentioned. We're doing Ankrum Opera House's Play Lab right now.
We're all over
So
the place.
we've been we've been lucky, to have that support. So you feel like at least you have you have some kind of support, even though you're all alone at your computer. So we've been doing that, and then also during the pandemic, we created this audio adaptation of Half the Sky, the musical you mentioned. And Half the Sky is the story of an Asian American woman climbing Mount Everest. We did the Rhinebeck Writers Retreat this past summer, working on that show. And the Fifth Avenue Theater in Seattle reached out to us and said, hey, we are looking to do some audio programming. We'd like to do some radio musicals for our 2020-2021 season. How would you feel about adapting Half the Sky to an all-audio format? And we were like, yeah! And Desdemona Chang, our amazing director, was like, this is great, because it's, we very deliberately and kind of, I don't want to say fearlessly because that's not true, but we very deliberately set the show on Mount Everest. So you're literally on Mount Everest climbing, from camp to camp and going back down. And then it also interspersed with that is the protagonist's past and her relationship with her family. And she has these, as she's climbing Mount Everest and gets disoriented, which is what happens when you're approaching the highest place in the world, your brain acts up and gets a little funny. So she's having these flashbacks about her relationship with her sister and her mother. And Desdemona was like, this will be awesome because we can have the best set in the world for this. Because it'll all be in the listener's mind. And we were very lucky. We worked with an amazing sound engineer, Brendan Hogan, at the Fifth, wonderful music director, Robert Frost. And so those are the kind of two, I guess, the main two projects that we've been working on. But Tidtaya, Tidtaya, please jump in.
Yeah, I feel like we are very blessed during the pandemic. Like we have, developmental for Half the Sky that we keep on writing and rewriting, and then we also creating new things. And yeah, it's very interesting because when we were recording Half the Sky, I was still visiting my family in Thailand, and gosh, the hours. So like when we recorded in New York City, my Zooming hours, like we are on, because for safety, none of us besides the actors and music directors and other people can be in there, but like we none of us can be here. But yeah, so my time for New York recording was 10 p.m. to like 6 a.m. in the morning. And then when we recorded in Seattle, that was midnight to 10 a.m. And also, there's rehearsal days and then there's like post-production. So I felt like it was almost like a month long of late nights.
Yes.
So, but it's fun, but I do know a fact of myself that once it hit like 3:30 a.m., like I can't function even with coffee. So that's a good learning experience.
It's really amazing how busy you both have been. It's really wonderful. I know the two of you brought a video of a project you worked on together to share with us. Could you set it up a little bit for our viewers and tell us what it's about, and then we'll play it?
Yeah, sure. I'd love to. This is from Sunwatcher, the piece that we mentioned, working on with our awesome director, Nana Dakin. This piece is called Travel Song. We wanted to draw from Japanese theater to tell the story of Hisako. And we settled on no theater because we found it had such a kind of specific relationship to the story of this woman, Hisako Koyama, who drew the sun every day for 40 years. And by doing so, created this body of work, the scientific body of work, that is part of the backbone of solar science right now. She's in kind of a pantheon. There are like 5 people, and one of them being Galileo. This woman had no scientific training, by the way. The kind of meditative quality of no theater, we were really drawn to. And we were also drawn to the relationship between the mortal and the immortal, or the dead, or the kind of spiritual world that no theater is interested in. So in our story, Sunwatcher, Hisako is playing kind of the Waki character, is what we would say in no theater. She's the one who bears witness to the story of the sun goddess. In no theater, the Waki character at the beginning of the show will sing what's called a travel song. Usually the Waki character is someone who's going on a pilgrimage often it's a holy site. And in our show, Hisako is going on a pilgrimage to outer space. And she's trying to travel. It's in the middle of World War II, and she wants to travel outside of herself and her circumstances and to connect with the wider universe. Tidtaya, have I missed anything?
No, and also like in a way, like we're adapting inspired by no theater and making it to this piece. So in a way, like for us, travel song also functions in a strangely way. It's also kind of an I want song, and also like kind of inspired by the true story too, that she, like Hisako herself, had a telescope which isn't good enough to see the moon. But because when you're looking at the sun, unless you actually have like a really like good like telescope that actually can look directly to the sun, you're actually mirroring the image of the sun to something else. So her telescope is capable of doing that. So by the end of the song, the sunrise, and that's the next song to hear in the future.
Well, let's hear it. Who is the performer?
It's me.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, yes, Isabella is an amazing singer.
I was literally changing the lyrics as I was singing.
Well, see, that's the writer's prerogative.
Uh-huh.
Take it away.
My name is not Galileo. My name is not Heinrich, not Pierre or Rudolph or Johann. My name is Hisako. The year is 1943. The sun is setting over Tokyo. The city plunges into shadow. But I go out into the dark. I drag my mattress into the backyard. I take my flashlight and the telescope my father gave me. I look up at the sky. I'm going far from Tokyo, traveling far from home, leaving the city streets below, following heaven's glow, to a world I've never known, to sights I've never seen, wandering a distant land, with no help to point the way, except the book of stars open in my hand. Now I'm far from Tokyo, traveling into space, free of the earthbound life I know, free from time and place. In the dark I lose my way, not one familiar sign. I wonder if I've gone too far, but I take another step. I stumble on the path of a falling star, flying on a star. I have reached the moon. High and bright, I reach out for the moon. Its face is covered in shadow. It turns away. It leaves me cold. Must I remain in Tokyo, never leaving home, alone till dawn? Something moves in the sky above me. Nothing else could shine as brightly. The sun, though clouds come and go, I will wait. I will wait for the sun.
Yay! Amazing. Oh my God. Your voice, that music, just gorgeous. Just thrilling. I'm always so excited, the new work that's out there. And as we all know, developing a new musical takes a lot of time and effort. I want to ask, all three of you, what are some of the most helpful resources developmental organizations can offer new musical theater writers? What are the things that you find you need to help shift your work forward, besides money, which is always the...
Yeah.
Tim, you want to take it?
Sure. I mean, this is a very before I take this question, can I just say that song had me drooling, like physically salivating.
Yeah.
For so many reasons. Your arrangement is insane. Isabella, your
Thanks,
voice
Joe.
killed me. Can we just say that, please? And God, I would murder for that kind of talent. So that's out in
It's-
the open now.
No, it's funny because, sorry, because you know that it's a work in progress, that show. So it's hard when you listen to things as a writer. You know, I'm always thinking like, that could be better. This could be better. This could.
Well, from our perspective, it was perfect.
Great. To go back to your question, then, Deb, there's so many. Every time I think I have an intelligent answer for this question, it really is a sort of it points a finger. It's like a symptom of a deeper disease, which is the institutional understanding of what musicals are and what they can do. Because so often I feel that it's these really tiny niche small groups with a little bit of funding that are really trying to support writers who have big ideas, right? We live in a commercial industry where I think audiences expect their plays to challenge them. They have zero expectation that their musicals will challenge them. And in fact, they're very uncomfortable when that happens, which I don't understand. We're in a theater. I expect to be challenged. We're using a medium who by definition transcends language. We can do so much. Why would we not want to challenge our audience? Why would we not? And that's obviously changing more and more. But there's this sort of this really old-fashioned kind of, not old-fashioned, but I mean, I guess technically it's old-fashioned. It's very old, adherence that musicals should simply entertain. And economically, that makes sense. It's the most expensive entertainment per capita. It's just for every seat, it costs so much money. But as a result, I think our understanding of what the form can do and can be is stunted. And we're very rigid about that. So every time I wish somebody would it's always, it starts with, maybe if more people evaluating or whatever would decenter their whiteness and understand as an art form, I don't have to, again, justify my culture in my presence on the stage based on a culture. I shouldn't have to do that, and yet I do. But it's not that. It's more about it is again pointing to a different thing, right? We have this understanding of what musicals should be, and it is on the basis of that every other decision is made. Again, I'm painting with a very broad brush, and I'm happy to say that since I've kind of come of age in this industry, people have been asking me to kind of evaluate things and kind of share my opinion, and so I try to nudge it in a different way, but it's still it's Sisyphean. I mean, it's just a very daunting task, and for every 3 people who have been in the industry for 20 years who suddenly understand, there's power here, there's potential here to change everything. There's 25 people just coming in off the turnip truck or whatever who grew up with song and dance, and that's all they want to do. So it's drops and drops in a bucket. But yeah, if I had a wish list, it would be to reset and change our institutional understanding of what musicals can do. I think once we recalibrate what our values are, then all of these other shows will come to light. I mean, they're coming to the surface now. They're coming out of Musical Theater Factory. They're coming out of NYU. They're coming out of the BMI workshop as well. There's so many writers who have been marginalized in one way or another that are so desperate to have their story told, to tell their way, and to not be a fetish for somebody else, that we're just bursting at the seams. Yet we're all kind of struggling for the same $15,000 every year.
Right? That's always the case, right?
Yeah. So it's really just to change our institutional understanding. I mean, I'm gonna end with one. I'm gonna stop talking with one radical thought, that if we wanted to, we could end racism in our country in a single generation. Our kids could potentially never know what that is if we all kind of reset and recalibrated and really just put childish things aside. But that's
wouldn't that be nice, right?
So.
I just want to absolutely, like the 3 of you, there are so many brilliant young emerging writers that, want their stories told. One of them is composer lyricist Yan Lee, who could not be with us today because he's in rehearsal, but I had a chance to chat with him earlier this week. Here is Yan Lee. Yan, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, Dev?
Good. It's so great to see you. Thank you for
Likewise.
joining us.
My pleasure.
Where are you joining us from?
I'm in Queens right now. Yeah, I've been here the whole quarantine.
Well, I've been fortunate to have gotten to work with you several times over the past year. We have not seen each other in person, but we stayed very busy and very creative on many projects.
I just remember the other day how we were supposed to do that Kaufman show together, in the fall. Yeah,
I know. Maybe next year.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, how did you begin writing musicals?
Well, I started out as a pianist, like any good, Asian kid. My parents started me out early on the piano, and I was on track to be in the classical world, be a classical pianist and composer. And then I saw a PBS documentary about Broadway musicals that was narrated by Julie Andrews. I think it was in the early 2000s.
Oh, yeah.
And they showed a clip from the end of Act 1 of Sunday in the Park with George, where the picture frame comes down and all the singers freeze in place into the picture. And that just changed my life. I got hooked and I started venturing into musical theater soon after that, and it completely changed the trajectory of what I was going to do.
Well, and you've done some incredible work.
Well, thanks.
I've had the great fortune of getting to work with you multiple times, and we share a common bond of being Canadian gentlemen who escaped to New York.
Yeah, and Western Canada too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You have written a brand new song that we're going to play. Do you want to tell us a little bit about it?
It's just like a fun summer song. I felt like writing it as everyone's kind of getting back into the outside world here. So that's kind of what it is.
All right. And shall we just play it and let our viewers see?
Yes, and the performer is the wonderful Kennedy Kanagawa, who will be singing this song.
Take it away, Kennedy.
Stepping out the door, knowing I was headed back to you for the first time in a year. I'm running. I got excited when I saw the tree that's halfway to your place. Who knew a tree could look so good? Well, it's stunning. Round the corner, God, it feels so foreign now to touch a wall or hear the subway screech. Getting warmer, just in time for summer. Not that summer starts till you are within reach. I'm on my feet, passing all the old familiar places one by one. On my way back to you, just down the street. You're only 6 more people away. Just past the mailman and the biker and the 2 kids at the bus stop and that guy who's pushing an Asian to the pavement. I ring the doorbell and I start to hum as I dream about your lovely smile for the first time in a year. I'm shaking. I hear your footsteps beating like a drum. You're halfway down the stairs, and while it's been so long, that sound there's no mistaking. On your front step, God, it felt like yesterday. Those butterflies inside my stomach flapped. Getting closer, suddenly I hear it. Somebody hits an Asian on the side of the head. I'm on my feet, imagining the brand new places one by one, where I'm gonna dance with you. And on the street, the city's waking up to the sound of someone shouting, "Go back where you came from." You appear and I feel so light. The world makes sense again. You appear and my heart takes flight. I'm back in your arms. I'm ready to forget all the yesterdays. I'm ready to move on from the months of fear. It felt like a forever, but now it's over. The surge is through, we're in the clear. I'm on my feet, kick me in the ribs, spit on my face, light me on fire, tell me I'm diseased. And on the street, we'll keep on being scared for our lives. Just don't walk up and shoot me. Let me stay on my feet, don't let it happen today. Let me stay on my feet so I can dance with you. Let me stay on my feet, don't let it happen today. Let me stay on my feet so I can dance with you. Let me stay on my feet, don't let it happen today. Let me stay on my feet so I can dance with you. Let me stay on my feet till the world again forgets that we're here. It's gonna be a good year.
Wow. Yeah, and as always, you write such smart, provocative, great stuff.
Oh, thanks.
Talk about the inspiration, or maybe inspiration is not a word, but
Well, yeah, just looking out the outside world, listen to the news. I was really interested in kind of looking at how frequently things like this happen and how jarringly they just kind of suddenly happen in the outside world, and also just how quickly we kind of move past them as like the news cycle goes on, and not knowing that, people always say there's a surge in anti-Asian violence. Well, like, it's always been there and it's always been in the background. So sort of finding a way to play up that background aspect and how it's always just kind of, on the wallpaper of our society as it's happening.
yeah.
And I just it was a great opportunity to listen to a lot of 98 Degrees and Backstreet Boys and try to find that summer pop vibe.
Yeah, I guess the pop vibe of 2020, 2021. It's we have been discussing it sort of all month. The crazy xenophobia that seems to be rampant. After the hate we've experienced, this past year, what role do you think we as artists play, and the work we create plays moving forward?
I still sort of go back and forth on this. I guess one thing definitely is to shine a light on it and try to give voice to the people whose stories need to be told about what's happening on this. And on the other side, also trying to struggle with the idea that we are, for better or worse, all within our little bubbles now. And so the people we do kind of reach out to the most easily are the people who are on the same page with us. So how to reach across to the people who are out there who are potentially going to commit these acts, and how to actually talk to them and figure out both what their source of fear is coming from, and also why they choose this form of lashing out, I think is ultimately the real way where we're going to figure out how to change things.
Yeah, it's so complicated, and I really appreciate my fellow Asian artists and the work they do to try and educate and inspire and shift the needle as much as we can.
Yeah.
Is this part of a bigger work by any chance?
No, this is just 2 weeks ago thinking about, well, what should I do for Dev on this interview?
Well, I think it might have to be. It's this was so fast and furious. Thank you so much, Yan. I'm your biggest fan, and check out more of Yan's amazing work on last week's episode, where he created a gorgeous arrangement of Children Will Listen and You've Got to Be Carefully Taught, sung by Shobin Orion and Mark De La Cruz. You can find that on Facebook and YouTube channels. Yan, we will see you very soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dev. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Take care.
Yan, how are you? Amazing segment. As we all know, the craziness in the news, we're all sort of, processing in our own ways. Do you I asked you, the three of you, after the events of the past year, do you feel hopeful we're returning to an industry change for the better? Any of you can jump in. Isabella, do you think that that coming out of this will see some growth?
I mean, I guess I can speak personally to my. I guess I can only speak kind of personally about my own personal hope, and where I found strength during the pandemic has been, being able to work with wonderful collaborators.
Yeah.
I feel really lucky. It's wonderful to be a writer because you can lean on, so many other wonderful artists. It's not just about, kind of generating the thing, but you have other, friends and people who support you, who can help realize this vision that you're trying to articulate. So my kind of hope and sense of joy and delight comes from, being able to work with people like Desdemona Chang, Nana Dakin, Robert Frost, like the wonderful actors we've been privileged to work with, and also finding new collaborators over the course of this year. We've worked a couple times now with a wonderful singer named Gemma Na. She has a beautiful crossover voice and can sing both musical theater and opera. And she's Australian. And right now she's studying actually in Vienna. And she's working on, she's helping us record some vocals for Sunwatcher right now. But that's like an opportunity we would never have thought of doing that before the pandemic. So the connectivity that the pandemic has enabled, I do hope that continues as we start to open up and come out on the other side.
Tidtaya, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's been more than a year that we are like doing this, looking at the camera instead of like meeting other people. But in a way, as much as I don't want to be like this any longer, but in a way it paved us to, like what Isabella said, like it paved us to reach out and collaborate with people that normally isn't in musical theater industry. Like, like we have we get to, our producer / cultural consultant, Ikumi Kuronaka, who worked with us for Sunwatcher, she's in Japan at the time, and she did connect us to the museum there, where, we get to Zoom with people there who worked and knew Hisako. And, it's, in a way, it's, being confined with this, screen in a way also paved us to meet more collaborators outside of musical theater world. And I hope that still continues, because in a way it's like we're reaching out to them, and they also, it's like you get to collaborate with people who normally don't associate with musical.
Yeah.
And in a way it's a blessing.
That's wonderful. Tim?
Unmute. Well, I'm interpreting your question, I think, a little bit differently, or I could just be like
You can interpret it any way you want.
But I mean, the short, like, I when you ask that question, I hear, will there potentially be a change in the way we do business and the way we represent, the way the stages should reflect the cities that they're in, and the people who live in the cities and those areas. And the short answer for me would be that as long as I have anything to say about it, the answer is yes. I'm very hopeful. The longer answer, though, is like, we have to understand that for a very long time there have been I think keepers of keys who are of a generation that never had to learn how, who for starters were very, very much the center of American culture for a very long time. I'm talking, of course, about the baby boomers, right? They were the ones that were marketed to the most. They were the ones who like inherited the wealth of the greatest generation, and they're the ones who never really let go, right?
Yeah.
They're the ones that they created Generation X, essentially. But that's neither here nor there. In addition, like in theater, anyways, like when they should traditionally have maybe been ready to kind of hand the keys over or to mentor and nurture, that entire generation got decimated, right, by the AIDS virus. So like many of them are still holding on. And that I think is kind of why we got to where we are now, in that they're not necessarily being like, you know, selfish or absent-minded about it, but like they understand theater to be something completely different than we do, because when they were coming up, that's what it was, right? And there was nobody there to say, hey, like, can you please show me how to do this? Because like an entire generation of artists were killed.
Yeah.
So from where I stand now, though, knowing that like there are a couple of these people in sort of these key positions, these gatekeepers, like I would never have guessed any of them would even begin to consider that like what they're holding on to, what they're continuing to make, is no longer relevant. Just from their worldview, like everything that they do is relevant, right? Because that's, you know, and again, painting with a very broad brush. I apologize if I've offended anybody with that. But the truth of the matter is many of them are stepping down. Many of them are like asking really hard questions and like trying to be as responsible with their power and with their autonomy as they can.
Mm-hmm.
And recognizing also that they traditionally haven't been. And then that's part of like the beauty of being alive right now, is we can understand that we've had privilege and we haven't always been responsible with it. But like to acknowledge that doesn't mean that we're horrible people. It just means that we're trying to do better. And I think a lot of them are, and I know many of them who could conceivably have gone on for another 10 years are like retiring and sort of paving the way and saying, you know what, like this is no longer my time. So I am hopeful for the people that are like 20 years younger than me. I'm less hopeful for myself, but you know, that's sort of what you sign up for when you're me. So
well, you know, on that note, the hope for a new dawn or a new day, would you like to introduce your fabulous song?
Yeah. So I wrote the song for you, Steph, when you were directing for Emerson Stage. And it's really kind of, so, okay, I just had a baby. My daughter's 15 months old, and I live, thank you, I did nothing. I live in a perpetual state of fear, right? And that's how it should be. Like every day for the rest of my life, I'm going to be terrified, and that's okay. That's what I signed up for. I'm remembering, though, when I was younger, not having that fear. And that's sort of what this song Golden is, because we were sort of talking about like, well, I don't even remember what we were talking about when this happened in like, was it December or January? But I wanted to kind of contrast what our finale was, which was a little bit wiser, a little bit, you know, more jaded, but I wanted to kind of capture the essence of this like kind of naivete. And as a matter of fact, this past year, so okay, the reason this video exists is because this past year, in addition to you, Dev, I've been so fortunate to be invited by my more presentable friends who have jobs at universities to kind of come in masterclass. So I've gotten to know like all of these graduating musical theater seniors, and they're all fantastic. They're all fantastic, and they're all like, they're not all the same color, which is like what? And I just like, they're all super kind and super generous, and we teach and we log off and they immediately send me emails. Thank you so much. Your song means so much to me, and if you ever need a singer, do let me know. And I was just like, wow, this is what it must have felt like for all of my friends who graduated with me in 2002 as soon as they finished, to have like all this institutional support, all these people. So I kind of wanted to like bring them all together and sort of do something with them, because I wanted to work with them outside of the academic setting. So what you're going to see are cast members, or well, students, I guess, representing University of Michigan, University of Utah, New York Film Academy's theater program, and Emerson Stage. And I just sort of sent them music and asked them to put themselves on camera, and I cut the whole thing together myself. that's what that is.
So here is Golden Day.
Was enough of getting fed the wrong stuff of being told how I should live. So got my bags packed up and got my phone backed up and I got no more fucks to give. Everything I thought I knew was rot. Everything I thought was true was not. Everything they taught me to believe was small. Now I know better and I'm gone out the door into the dawn, and it's early morning call. Follow the sun. Doing while I'm not beholden, why cannot be controlled, and while I can't be told who I'm supposed to be. Follow the sun. Take a risk and take my chances, take my power, take my stances, make some deal and hold advances true to me. If I'm here tomorrow, I'm still holding. I follow the sun and I'm golden.
Now there's nothing but highway, nowhere to go but my way, endless horizon on display. Everything makes me grateful, feast my eyes on colorful, give my thanks I have this day.
No one here to tell me that I'm off.
No one here to yell or bitch or scoff.
No one here to tell me any piece of sky. Now my life's exactly like my dreams,
Everything's exactly like it seems,
and it's not hard to reason why. Follow the sun. Do it while I'm not the broken, while I cannot be controlled, and while I can't be told who I'm supposed to be. Take a risk and take my chances, take my power, take my stances, make some daring golden advances true to me. I cast off the lessons I enrolled in. I follow the sun. Now I'm here and deep and flaming, yet I have to wonder, what can I see with the sun staring right back at me? Follow the sun. Long gone are the rules I was controlled in. I follow the sun.
I'm golden,
I'm golden. I'm golden.
I'm golden,
I'm golden. I'm golden.
I'm
Yay! So fun. You sure know how to write a tune, Tim. Oh, so good. It's so great to hear that song again. Amazing performances by all. We are so running out of time. I could talk to both of you all night, but I know we have so many viewers who are dying to ask some questions. So let's get a few of them in before we have to sign off. Let's see. What questions do we have? Emma says, do you feel like storytelling is different in different parts of the world? Well, maybe Tidtaya, you can speak to that, because you kind of mentioned at the beginning of the interview being in Thailand and musical theater not really existing there till now. But What do you think?
Isabella, feel free to chime in on that too as well. But yeah, I think so. I feel like everyone has their own identity of like how to storytelling, but in a way it's all relatable. Like for example, like how we looking at no theater and how we kind of pinpoint things that it's like, oh, this could have been unconditional love song, this could have been an I Want song. So there's a way to bridge things together and to have a different types of storytelling and merge it with musical theater and especially even though with storytelling as well as and also with sound to like incorporate sounds of different music, different tonality, different scales, and just put it into musical theater canon. So I guess that's I believe it's our goal as writing team. So.
Yeah, I would add, Tidtaya mentioned no theater, which we've been studying while we're writing Sun Watcher. And no theater is kind of a meditation on one emotion. It's not really plot oriented. It's kind of a deep dive into, what does it mean to grieve, or what does it mean to feel jealousy? What does it mean to, feel passion and desire? And that's a little bit different than, the kinds of musicals, like, for example, that Tim was talking about before, what we're brought up to believe, goes on Broadway. But it's still musical theater. So I think the answer is for sure storytelling is different in different parts of the world. But the aim is to connect in the end. Like, the aim is to create this experience for everyone who's participating in that art, the performers and the audience, to have this experience together and to kind of, it's a chance for all of us to think about, what does it mean to be human and what does it mean to live alongside each other?
Yeah. Let's take one more question. How do you start writing a musical?
With trepidation.
Yeah. How do you start writing a musical? Silence.
Tim.
I'll talk. Okay. For me, it's been different every time. Fundamentally, if I'm not writing something in service to a really big idea, then it's never really satisfying. So I'll say that, like, if I have a big idea, I always ask myself, like, what's wrong with the world and how do I think I can change it? And that'll like usually feed into something. I haven't written anything full length in the last 4 years. Got to wonder why, because I keep changing the goal line of atrocities. But I think that's broadly speaking, again, what it is for me. Although I wouldn't mind sharing an anecdote by the great Maury Eston, who when asked what comes first when he writes a song, the music or the words, his response was the moment. Like, that's what you write first, is the moment, which is very astute, I think. So,
any advice from Tidtaya or Isabella for our burgeoning young musical theater writers who want to start?
Find great collaborators. Yeah, find the people who are inspired and energized by the same things that you are. And I'm lucky. I'm really, really lucky that I work with Tidtaya and that we get to jam together and just enjoy the process of creating together. And those people, your collaborators, will get you through, those dark nights of the soul where you're sitting there going, I don't think this means anything. I don't think I'm good enough. I don't think nothing that I wrote makes sense, and I don't think it matters. Your collaborators, the people you work with, will get you through.
Well, I'm also lucky to be her collaborator, like extremely lucky. And I guess also, writing musical is also like to not stop writing it despite any, anything that happens in your life. We're always going to face, rejections and everything. Just keep writing. And, it's hard when you're in the middle of it and try to finish everything. But, again, like when you have a good and amazing collaborators and, it's always a nice thing. And I still miss going to Isabella's apartment.
Well, hopefully soon, right? Hopefully you'll be able to sit together soon.
Hopefully.
We are so out of time. I so appreciate all three of you. And for our viewers, I know there were a lot of questions, so maybe our writers will respond later in the comments and answer all your questions. Before we go, please consider supporting Live and in Color by going to liveandincolor.org to donate. As we mentioned earlier, in honor of AAPI month, all donations made during this program will be matched dollar for dollar. So please make a tax-deductible donation today to support the work of the artists at Live and in Color at our website, liveandincolor.org. It will support all our amazing artists as they develop new work, as these brilliant artists continue to develop their work. Next week, join us for the third episode of our special month celebrating Asian artists and activists who are changing the future of theater and the world. Next week, we'll be talking to 3 theater makers and Live and in Color alumni who are working to create new and essential stories: singer-songwriter Janet No, writer and composer Chiang Eng, and actor, writer, lyricist Jessica Wu. You won't want to miss it. Thank you to everyone who tuned in today. Thank you, the 3 of you, for joining me. I am your biggest fans. You inspire me and the world. So thank you. Tim, would you lead us on a little toast as we say goodbye?
To someday, very soon, being together again, and to big, warm, fuzzy hugs.
To warm, fuzzy hugs. Cheers. Thank you, everyone.
It's time to change the story. Come on and change this tune. See how the future looks bright.